The world is not ruled by the brightest minds or the most virtuous hearts. It never has been. It is ruled by those who understand something far more uncomfortable. Power does not respond to intelligence alone. It responds to perception, leverage, and control. Look around you. The people who dominate rooms, shape outcomes, and bend reality in their favor are not necessarily smarter than you. They simply operate on a different frequency. While others were trained to solve problems, they learned how to read people. While others chased approval, they learned how to command silence. You were taught that intelligence meant memorization, credentials, and technical skill. That story was never meant to free you. It was meant to make you useful, efficient, replaceable. True power does not come from what you know. It comes from how well you understand the invisible currents moving through every human interaction. Dark intelligence is not about cruelty. It is about clarity. It is the ability to see what is happening beneath the words, to hear what is being said in the pauses, and to act without the emotional desperation that keeps most people trapped. Most people are not living deliberately. They are reacting to fear they don't understand, validation they crave, and narratives that were handed to them without consent. They believe they are players, but they move like pieces. And if you feel exhausted, overlooked, or constantly outmaneuvered, it is not because you lack value. It is because you are playing a different game than everyone else around you. This is not a discussion about morality. Morality is a luxury for those who already hold power. This is a discussion about survival. Machiavelli was not a monster. He was a realist surrounded by optimists who kept getting destroyed. He understood that the most dangerous place to live is the gap between how you wish people behaved and how they actually do. Many of you tried to be good, transparent, reasonable. And what did that buy you? Betrayal disguised as misunderstanding, effort rewarded with invisibility. Lesser minds rising above you simply because they understood the rules you were never taught. That chapter ends here. What follows are not affirmations, they are lenses, tools that rewire how you interpret the world so you stop bleeding energy into systems designed to consume you. But understand this before we go further. Once you see clearly, you cannot unsee. This knowledge dissolves comfort. It strips away the illusion that you were unlucky. It forces you to confront the truth that power has always been available, just never explained. The first law is deceptively simple, and that is what makes it lethal. Selective silence. Most people talk not to communicate, but to soothe themselves. Silence terrifies them because in silence they are forced to sit with their own uncertainty. So they fill the space. They explain. They overshare. They reveal motivations, fears, and intentions without realizing they are handing over the blueprint of their mind. And the moment you become predictable, you become controllable. Dark intelligence begins the moment you stop using words to be liked and start using them with intent. Machiavelli understood that the person who speaks the least often holds the most leverage, because information is currency. Every sentence you speak is a transaction. When you talk, you spend. When you listen, you collect. Think back to the last time you felt genuinely unsettled by someone. It wasn't the loud one. It wasn't the emotional one. It was the person who stayed still, who watched, who didn't rush to explain themselves or fill the gap. That silence creates a vacuum, and human nature cannot tolerate a vacuum. When you hold your silence, others rush to fill it. They talk themselves into revealing their insecurities, their ambitions, their strategies. They tell you exactly where they are exposed, all because they couldn't handle the weight of not being in control. This is why silence is not passive. It is active containment. Stop defending your actions. Stop narrating your intentions. Stop offering opinions before they are demanded. Become opaque. When people cannot read you, they cannot position against you. They hesitate, and hesitation is power. Silence functions like deep water. On the surface, it appears calm, harmless, but beneath it lies depth, pressure, and danger. Most people splash loudly in shallow pools, mistaking noise for strength. You are learning to move where pressure exists, where every movement is deliberate and nothing is wasted. When you master selective silence, something shifts. People start leaning in. They seek your approval instead of assuming it. They project significance onto your words because they are rare. You no longer chase relevance. Relevance begins to orbit you. This is the first fracture in the illusion. Power is not asserted. It is inferred. And silence is the first signal that you are no longer operating on the same level as everyone else. Once you understand silence, the next illusion must die. The illusion that the world operates on fairness. This is where most people resist, because this law threatens the identity they built around being good. Strategic amorality is not the absence of ethics. It is the refusal to let moral emotion blind you to reality. You were trained to interpret events through a child's lens. Good versus bad, right versus wrong, fair versus unfair. That framework feels noble, but in the arena of power, it functions like a chain. It keeps you emotionally reactive, perpetually offended, and easy to manipulate. The Machiavellian mind does not ask, "Is this fair?" It asks, "Is this effective?" When a predator hunts, it is not evil. It is necessary. When a storm destroys a city, it is not malicious. It is indifferent. Yet you suffer because you expect the universe to behave according to your personal moral code. You get angry at betrayal because you believe it shouldn't have happened. You feel crushed by loss because you believe you deserved better. That belief is not virtue. It is entitlement disguised as innocence. Dark intelligence requires a shift in posture. You stop moralizing events and start analyzing them. You view reality the way a mechanic views a broken engine. When the car doesn't start, the mechanic doesn't curse fate. He finds the faulty part and fixes it or replaces it. When someone attacks you, manipulates you, or undermines you, offense is wasted energy. Offense is what weak minds indulge in to feel righteous while remaining powerless. Instead, you ask colder questions. Why did they move? What do they gain? Where is their leverage? How do I neutralize or redirect this? This is strategic amorality. You are not abandoning ethics. You are placing them downstream of clarity. A good person without power is not virtuous. They are simply unprotected. Think of morality as fire. In the right container, it provides warmth and direction. Uncontained, it burns the house down. Strategic amorality is the container. It allows you to choose when to act with softness and when to act with force, without being hijacked by guilt or outrage. The metaphor is simple. You don't bring a sermon to a knife fight and expect to survive. Once you detach from moral panic, you gain something rare: emotional altitude. From that height, you can see patterns instead of isolated insults. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What does this reveal, and what move does it allow next?" Power begins where victimhood ends. But coldness alone creates another problem. A purely detached figure becomes a target. This is where amateurs fail. They think dark intelligence means being rigid, distant, untouchable at all times. That is how envy is born. That is how enemies form quietly, not because you attacked, but because you made others feel small simply by existing. This leads to the next law: controlled vulnerability. Humans are emotional creatures pretending to be rational. If you appear flawless, invulnerable, or permanently composed, people do not admire you. They study you for weaknesses. They wait for your fall. True dark intelligence understands that perception must be managed, not denied. Controlled vulnerability means you choose a harmless imperfection and display it deliberately. Not your core weakness, not your true ambition. A decoy, a scratch, not the throat. You might admit you're bad with technology. You might share a mildly embarrassing story from your past. You might ask for a small, insignificant favor. This triggers a powerful psychological effect. When people help you or see you as imperfect, they lower their guard. They feel superior or bonded. Their anxiety dissolves. While they are bonding with your curated flaw, they stop scanning for threats. Meanwhile, your real strengths, plans, and limits remain hidden. You are no longer perceived as a rival god. You are perceived as human, and humans feel safe underestimating what they think they understand. The metaphor here is armor worn beneath cloth. To the eye, you look approachable. Underneath, you are protected. The mistake is either wearing no armor at all or parading it openly. Controlled vulnerability is camouflage. It disarms without surrendering. Never confuse exposure with honesty. Exposure hands power away. Control decides what is revealed and when. When you master this, you become difficult to categorize. And what cannot be categorized cannot be easily attacked. This flows directly into the next principle, the law of the mirror. People are not interested in you. They are interested in themselves. Everyone believes they are the protagonist of the story. The error you were taught is trying to become impressive in someone else's narrative. Dark intelligence does the opposite. You become a mirror. When someone speaks, you reflect their emotions, not your opinions. If they are angry, you validate the anger without agreeing to the conclusion. If they are excited, you match the energy without adding direction. You use their language, their posture, their tempo. Something subtle happens here. They stop seeing you as an external presence. They see themselves reflected back. And because people love their own reflection, they begin to trust you, admire you, confide in you. Not because you persuaded them, but because you disappeared. While they are preening, explaining, and performing for their own ego, you are collecting data. You are learning what they value, what they fear, and where they are fragile. The mirror has no ego. It does not compete. It observes. And while they fall in love with the image they see in your eyes, you quietly map the terrain. This is how influence is built without force. A chess player does not rush the board. He studies patterns. He waits for self-exposure. These laws are not about domination. They are about positioning. And once your position changes, outcomes follow without effort. This is the shift. You are no longer reacting inside the game. You are learning to see the board. Once you can read the board, the next prison must be broken. Attachment to outcome. This is the root of most anxiety and nearly all weakness. You want the job, the approval, the relationship, the recognition. And because you want it, you signal need. Need creates gravity, but not the kind that pulls things toward you. It collapses inward and crushes you. The law of outcome independence is simple but brutal. The person who needs the least controls the most. When you are emotionally invested in a specific result, every interaction leaks desperation. Your tone shifts. Your posture softens. You begin negotiating against yourself. Others feel this instinctively. And in the physics of power, Scarcity is attractive only when it belongs to you, not when you embody it. Outcome independence does not mean apathy. It means preparation without attachment. You plan. You execute. You show up fully. But you internalize a quiet truth. If this collapses, I will survive. That mental acceptance destroys fear, and fear, once removed, takes manipulation with it. When you are willing to walk away from the table belongs to you. When you are willing to lose the relationship, you set the standards of the relationship. Machiavelli understood that fear of loss is the most reliable leash ever invented. If your employer knows you are terrified of losing your job, you are owned. If your partner knows you are terrified of being alone, you are owned. If your identity depends on any external outcome, you are exposed. The mental exercise is violent but necessary. Visualize the worst-case scenario. Lose the status. Lose the comfort. Lose the image. Sit with it until the fear burns out. On the other side of that fire is something dangerous. Freedom. When loss no longer terrifies you, your voice stabilizes. Your decisions sharpen. You stop bargaining for safety. The metaphor is a climber cutting loose excess weight at high altitude. What felt essential on the ground becomes lethal as you ascend. Outcome independence is not loss. It is altitude adaptation. From this position, something paradoxical happens. People chase what does not chase them. Opportunities move toward those who do not beg. When you operate from abundance, even in scarcity, you invert the dynamic. You are no longer auditioning for life. Life begins responding to you. Now comes a concept most people misunderstand entirely: the useful enemy. You are taught to seek peace, harmony, universal acceptance. This is biological comfort, not strategic wisdom. Conflict is not a malfunction. It is a forge. Without resistance, the mind softens. Without opposition, discipline decays. Machiavelli advised rulers not only to be prepared for conflict, but to study it constantly, even in times of peace. An enemy sharpens you. An enemy exposes your blind spots. An enemy forces you to define yourself. When you have no enemy, you become complacent, drunk on your own self-image. History is clear on this point. Friction creates fire. Tesla needed Edison. Ali needed Fraser. Pressure produces precision. Dark intelligence does not whine about opposition. It harvests it. The hatred directed at you is not always a curse. Often it is evidence that you are moving. Use it. Let it fuel discipline instead of resentment. Let doubt harden your focus. And understand this: nothing unites people faster than a shared threat. If you want to build loyalty, you do not preach love. You define danger. A group without an enemy fractures inward. A group with a clear external threat aligns instantly. The metaphor is ancient. Tribes survived by identifying predators, not by celebrating harmony. Choose your enemies wisely. Not every critic deserves the honor. Select an enemy worthy of your evolution, and let the pressure elevate you. Next comes a law that dismantles one of the most dangerous modern myths: authenticity. You were told to book yourself, as if the self were a single, stable entity. That belief limits you. You are not one thing. You are a system of responses. You behave differently with your parents than with your rivals, differently with your lover than with your competitors. Dark intelligence makes this multiplicity conscious. The law of the persona states that personality is a tool, not a confession. When someone says, "I'm just being me," What they often mean is, I lack control. The man who explodes at a dinner party and calls it authenticity is not honest. He is undisciplined. Machiavelli understood that effective leaders wear masks not to deceive, but to adapt. In high-stakes environments, you wear the mask of authority, calm, slow, decisive. With family, you wear the mask of protection, warm, present, grounded. This is not lying. This is calibration. You do not use a hammer to turn a screw. Why would you use one personality for every situation? Machiavelli's lion and fox metaphor lives here. The lion is force. The fox is cunning. If you are only the lion, you walk into traps. If you are only the fox, wolves devour you. Survival belongs to those who can shift. The metaphor is water. Water has no fixed shape, yet it erodes stone. It adapts to the container, and when the container breaks, it flows on. Rigidity shatters. Fluidity survives. When you stop worshiping authenticity and start practicing adaptability, your social intelligence multiplies. You are no longer exposed by consistency. You are protected by range. This prepares you for the final mental shift of this segment. Suspicion. Trust is not a virtue. It is a risk assessment. The naive project their own intentions onto the world. I wouldn't lie, so they won't. That projection is the source of most betrayal. Dark intelligence does not assume malice, but it never assumes purity. Everyone acts in their own interest, even when disguised as generosity. This is not cynicism. It is wakefulness. Suspicion is not paranoia. Paranoia is fear without evidence. Suspicion is attention. You watch what people do, not what they say. Words are cheap. They are designed to manipulate. Behavior is expensive. It reveals truth. When someone offers an opportunity, you ask silently, what do they gain? When someone flatters excessively, you ask, what are they hiding? You test loyalty in small doses before granting access to the core. You give limited power and observe how it is used. The metaphor is fire testing metal. Weak alloys crack under heat. Strong ones reveal themselves. Better to be pleasantly surprised by loyalty than devastated by betrayal. At this stage, your perception has shifted completely. You no longer walk through rooms blind. You see currents. You sense motives. And yet, one law remains, deeper than all the others. One that determines whether this knowledge makes you whole or turns against you. The final threshold before transformation is the one most people avoid their entire lives. Not because it is complex, but because it is terrifying. This is the law of the shadow. Every society teaches the same lie in different language. Be harmless. Be nice. Be agreeable. Suppress anger. Suppress ambition. Suppress the hunger for control. You were taught that power is dangerous, that desire corrupts, that darkness is something to be ashamed of, but a harmless man is not a virtuous man. He is simply a man without capacity. Dark intelligence begins when you accept a brutal truth. You are capable of terrible things. You have the ability to manipulate, to deceive, to dominate, to destroy. Pretending otherwise does not make you moral. It makes you blind, and blindness is how you get eaten. Carl Jung called this the shadow. Machiavelli understood it centuries earlier without the language of psychology. If you deny your capacity for darkness, it does not disappear. It leaks out sideways. Passive aggression, resentment, self-sabotage, moral superiority masking impotence. The shadow you refuse to face becomes the master you serve unconsciously. Integration is the only solution. To integrate the shadow is not to act on it recklessly. It is to look directly at it and say, I see you, and you answer to me. When you know you could harm someone but you choose not to, that restraint has weight. That is virtue, not innocence. Control. The metaphor is simple. A man with no weapon is not peaceful. He is defenseless. A man with a weapon who keeps it sheathed is disciplined. The world can feel the difference immediately. There is an edge in his presence, a quiet warning that says, I am calm by choice, not by limitation. This is why people instinctively respect those who have darkness under control. They sense depth. They sense danger that is contained, not absent. Machiavelli's ideal leader was never a saint. He was a man who could use bad methods for good ends without being consumed by them. That edge is what prevents others from testing you casually. Once you integrate your shadow, fear dissolves. You stop being shocked by the darkness in others because you recognize it. Manipulation no longer confuses you. Aggression no longer destabilizes you. You have already faced these forces internally. The world loses its ability to surprise you. At this point, the laws stop being tactics and become perception. You walk into rooms differently. You notice who fills silence nervously. You see who mirrors, who postures, who hides behind moral language to conceal hunger. You are no longer a civilian in the war of the mind. You are a conscious participant, but power carries a cost, and this is where the path narrows. As you wake up, you begin to feel distance. Old conversations feel shallow. Old relationships strain. People tell you that you have changed, that you are colder, quieter, harder to read. They are correct. What they are really reacting to is the absence of your old predictability. You are shedding the skin of the person who needed to be understood. Isolation is not a side effect. It is the toll. When you stop performing, fewer people recognize you. When you stop explaining, fewer people feel comfortable around you. This is not a failure. It is filtration. You are moving into the realm of outliers, where clarity replaces belonging. The final metaphor is the desert. In the desert, illusions die quickly. There is no crowd to hide in, no noise to anesthetize you. But what survives there is real, hardened, self-sustaining. Those who cross it emerge fewer, but sharper. These laws are not a checklist. They are a filter. From now on, you will see the silence behind words, the hunger behind kindness, the strategy behind smiles. History has proven these principles for thousands of years. The only remaining question is not whether they work. It is whether you have the stomach to live with what you now see. Most people will consume this information as entertainment, then return to sleep, to hoping the world becomes fair, to mistaking noise for strength. But you are still here, still listening, still awake. And that means something irreversible has already begun. The abyss is not something you fall into. It is something you learn to stand in without blinking. And if you can do that, you do not need to chase power. Power will recognize you. What happens next is not empowerment. It is responsibility. Once you see clearly, you cannot pretend you don't. You cannot unknow the patterns, the games, the silent negotiations happening beneath every interaction. This is why power is isolating. It separates you from the comfort of ignorance. The more aware you become, the fewer places you can rest without lying to yourself. At this stage, most people hesitate. They feel the weight of what they've learned and wonder if life was easier before. It was, but it was also smaller. The question now is not whether these laws work. History has already answered that. The question is whether you are willing to live without illusions, because the greatest danger is not external enemies. It is regression. Regression is the temptation to go back to being understood instead of being effective, to choose approval over position, to soften your edge so others feel comfortable again. This is where most people abandon power, not because they can't handle dominance, but because they can't handle solitude. The final discipline is internal governance. You must rule yourself the way Machiavelli advised princes to rule states, with consistency, foresight, and emotional containment. The moment you let anger drive your decisions, you become readable. The moment you let guilt override clarity, you become exploitable. The moment you let fear of loss dictate your moves, you return to chains. Power begins and ends with self-command. The metaphor is a kingdom with weak borders. It does not matter how intelligent the ruler is if the gates are always open. Your thoughts, your reactions, your availability, these are borders. Guard them, not with paranoia, but with intention. This is where silence evolves again. It is no longer a tactic. It becomes your default posture. You speak when speech moves the board. You act when action compounds leverage. You withdraw when presence would dilute value. This restraint creates gravity. People feel it before they understand it. Now understand this clearly. You are not here to dominate everyone. That is a childish fantasy. You are here to never be dominated again. When you no longer need to prove yourself, insults lose their hook. When you no longer need permission, manipulation loses its teeth. When you no longer need to be liked, fear evaporates. You become difficult to rush, difficult to provoke, difficult to corner. This is the state Machiavelli truly described, though few ever reach it. The ruler who is feared not because he is cruel, but because he is unshakable. Loved not because he is generous, but because his presence feels stabilizing. Dangerous not because he seeks conflict, but because he is capable of it. You will notice something subtle as you live this way. People begin to self-correct around you. They choose their words more carefully. They hesitate before crossing lines, not because you threaten them, but because your boundaries are invisible and absolute. They do not know where the edge is, only that crossing it has consequences. That is real authority. The final illusion to release is the idea that power must be loud. Loud power is insecure power. It needs witnesses. Quiet power does not announce itself. It rearranges outcomes while remaining unseen. It does not need credit. It does not argue. It does not explain. You are not meant to convince the masses. You are meant to position yourself so that outcomes favor you regardless of opinion. This is why Machiavelli warned against being hated, but never against being misunderstood. Misunderstanding is often camouflage. At the end of this path, there is no applause. There is clarity. There is stillness. There is the calm confidence that comes from knowing you can navigate chaos without losing yourself. You will walk into rooms and feel the undercurrent immediately. You will sense who is posturing, who is afraid, who is playing a longer game. You will no longer feel the urge to expose them. Exposure is for those who still need validation. You simply adjust position and let time do the work. This is the quiet awakening. You are not here to save the world. You are here to see it as it is and move accordingly. Most people will never do this. They will remain civilians, reacting to noise, chasing comfort, mistaking hope for strategy. You are no longer one of them. From this moment forward, you move with restraint, observe with patience, and act with precision. You are peaceful, not because you are harmless, but because you are disciplined. You are silent, not because you are afraid, but because you are calculating. And once you reach this state, something strange happens. You stop asking how to gain power. You start deciding when to use it. You were never meant to be loud, liked, or understood by everyone. You were meant to be precise. From this point on, you don't argue with the world. You read it. You don't chase respect. You create conditions where disrespect becomes impossible. Power is no longer something you seek outside yourself. It is the calm authority in your posture, the silence in your timing, the restraint in your choices. Most will never notice the shift. They don't need to. What matters is this: you are no longer asleep inside the game. You see the board, you control your position, and you move only when it serves you.